But so yeah, to answer your question, with a 6 foot diameter sun right here, you can see the pier we poured out there the other day. Uh, Saturn will be over in Harrybrook Park.
So this, if we were to build a model to scale with our 6 foot sun, it would extend from here to Harrybrook Park. You could fit 4 quadrillion Earths inside this star. That boggles my mind. Fortunately, it's almost 5,000 light years from here, so we don't have much to worry about when it finally explodes. Next up is Gamma Velorum, called the spectral gem of the southern skies because of its unusual spectral frequencies, all kinds of exotic minerals and elements in its spectrum. It is also notable for being the nearest and heaviest known example of Wolf-Rayet's star system. And essentially what that means is it sheds. Instead of a normal solar wind like our sun, it sheds tremendous layers of its atmosphere. Many, many thousands of times more material than our sun does. It's also extremely hot and extremely bright. I would not want to be on a planet near there. We also, in our catalog of remarkable southern stars, have Neus in the Puppis constellation. It's a little over 1,000 light years from here. It's the Greek word for ship. It's an extreme blue supergiant star, one of the brightest stars in the entire galaxy. It has a total luminosity, including all different spectra, especially ultraviolet, 790,000 times brighter than our sun. And considering it's only 20 solar radii across, that's extremely impressive. If Neus were as close to us as Sirius is, so that's about 8.6 light years, it would be as bright as a quarter moon. It would be casting shadows right now. Now, stars are not the only thing of note in the southern hemisphere that we can't see up here. One of them is the Large Magellanic Cloud. It straddles the Mensa and Dorado constellations. It's got an apparent magnitude of 0.9. It's 157,000 light years from here, give or take a few thousand light years, which is actually a lot of error. It's the third closest galaxy from our galaxy, weighing in at approximately 10 billion solar masses, and they still call this a dwarf galaxy. That's about a tenth that of our galaxy. It's described as an astronomical treasure house by NASA authorities. If you were to be on a planet in the Large Magellanic Cloud, the Milky Way would be magnitude -2, which is quite bright. You can see anything as dim as magnitude 7. And it would be as broad as 70 full moons lined end to end. Can you imagine looking up every night and seeing that dominating your sky? We also, however, have the Small Magellanic Cloud in the Tucana constellation. It's somewhat dimmer, magnitude 2.7. It's a bit farther too. It's one of the most distant objects you can observe with the naked eye. While it's a dwarf galaxy, it nevertheless has several 100 million stars, and it's speculated that it used to be another galaxy similar to our own that was unfortunately gobbled up by our bigger and somewhat meaner galaxy, the Milky Way. Similarly to the Small Magellanic Cloud, we have Omega Centauri, which is also expected to be kind of the unexpected galaxy that we ate. It is the largest and brightest globular cluster known to be associated with the Milky Way. It's 12 billion years old, and at its center, it's believed that there are stars as close as a tenth of a light year to one another. Now, just for reference, the nearest star to our sun is about 4.5 light years in the Centauri constellation. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about Aboriginal astronomy, largely because it's sick when I do these presentations, and I've been covering Greek and other ancient cultures. And when I visited Australia, I had the good fortune to see a number of their various archaeological sites. This one, unfortunately, I did not see, is in Ngau Ngau, South Australia. It's believed to represent lunar cycles according to oral histories. Unfortunately, we haven't exactly deciphered what these carvings mean, for reasons I'll cover in just a minute. But the Aboriginal people have settled Australia for a bare minimum of 40,000 years. Many suspect it's closer to 50,000 years. That makes them by far the oldest astronomers in the world. And as such, they became pretty astute observers of the night sky. Tidal changes, animal behaviors, food supply availability, and temperature shifts were all very linked to the time of year, and they noted that by the passage of stars. Just to give you an idea of the complexity of Australia's climate, they have 6 seasons in the northern areas of Australia. Being marked by temperature shifts. Those are marked by changes in humidity, water levels, and frequency of forest fires. Stuff, knowing what time of year it is. And they became masters of it by necessity. If they weren't, they died. Aboriginal Australian cosmology is not readily understood by Western observers, simply because it is so utterly alien to most of our sensibilities. I won't attempt to do it full justice, however, there are a number of resources that I'd be happy to discuss with you if you'd like to ask questions afterwards. Their complex beliefs are often impenetrable to those who have not been born into them, unfortunately. One of these beliefs holds that the land is populated with forces both visible and unseen, which arose during a period known to the Aboriginal Australians as the dreaming time. Forgive me if this sounds a little bit mystical, but these are the two words I prefer to use. The dreaming is roughly analogous to a period of creation. It's much more complicated than that. And one of their beliefs, which I find fascinating, is that the world and all of its features, whether it's a tree, a hill, a rock, a living thing, these are all records of some sort. What spiritual beings and ancestors did once long ago. So in a way, we are jotted notes of beings who lived uncounted years ago. Now, these illustrations you see here are 2 manifestations of one of the most enduring Aboriginal Australian beliefs. It's called the rainbow serpent. This is a cave painting on the order of 12,000 years old, maybe a bit older. This is a much more modern representation, very stylized. And the rainbow serpent is a manifestation of the constant struggle in Australian life between water and the life-giving but dangerous forces represented there, and the sun, which is extremely powerful in Australia. There's very little cover, no large trees for most of the area, and if you're left out in the sun in Australia, you're essentially finished. Now, the Aboriginal people have a rich heritage of stories involving the sky. One legend that I found very interesting involved a great emu. Many northerners will call it an emu. It's actually pronounced emu. I learned that the hard way. In the sky that would point to certain stars to decree the time for rituals and events. This emu had great cultural significance to many Aboriginal cultures. Now, their idea of a constellation is a little strange by our reckoning. So, instead of looking at the Milky Way itself, you want to look at the dust clouds obscuring the Milky Way. So you're really looking for the emu's shadow. And if you look right here, you can kind of make out the head, and then there is the body, and the feet trailing behind. It's kind of a long-necked, ostrich-looking thing. And you can just... maybe? There we go. Just make it out in the dust cloud there. And directly beneath, I'm not sure how well you can see this, there are stone etchings found at the Elvina archaeological site near Sydney that depict this same constellation. The head, the body, and the legs. Archaeoastronomists and archaeologists both have had trouble gathering hard evidence of Aboriginal astronomy for several reasons. First, and most unfortunately, Aboriginal people relied almost exclusively on paintings and oral histories, so there are very few, if any, written records.